Delta 2648, descend and maintain 7,000.
Alright, descend to 7,000, Delta 2648.
Boy 3130, reduce speed to 210.
Return speed on board 3130.
Sorry, United 887, the first bridge for 211.
United 887, San Francisco Airwing, come, runway 28 left, third line.
28 left, third line, United 887.
Hey everyone, Southern Aviator here. Hope you're all doing very well. In this video, I want to cover proper takeoff technique. I'll start off by saying there is a lot of things that you can go into concerning the takeoff and the different aspects of it, but I'm going to try to cater this to specifically flight simulator, what you would do within a flight sim on your desktop or laptop. So beginning, I'm going to use this chart in front of us, or in front of me, to try to illustrate the particular elements or sections of a takeoff. So starting off, this right here on this end is where you would begin your ground roll. You would apply takeoff thrust until you got to V1, which is here. At V1, it's called V1, that is decision speed. That's where you would decide whether or not you're going to take off. Once you cross 100 knots, that's considered the high speed portion of the takeoff, and you wouldn't abort the takeoff typically unless you have a major mechanical failure at that point. Outside of that, you would continue on to V1. After V1, you're going no matter what, because at V1 you do not have the takeoff distance left to stop the airplane even if you want to. So that's the basic elements of V1. VR, that's where you'll begin to rotate. And the idea is by the time you get done rotating, you will be at VLOF. And then V2 is what's called takeoff safety speed. It's basically a speed where you're going fast enough that you can maintain lift safely and climb out. And here's the 35-foot obstacle. You would be able to, on one engine, clear a hypothetical 35-foot obstacle at the end of the runway. It doesn't matter if there's one there or not, but you should be able to clear one if there were. And this is all on single engine. This, as a matter of fact, this entire chart is based on a single engine. So keep that in mind. So first segment is from where you have a positive rate of climb, and that's where you go gear up. So from the time that you go gear up until the gear is clean under the airplane in the belly, you are in first segment climb. Once you have the gear up, you now are in second segment climb. And that is up through 1,000 feet, or acceleration altitude. Now I know this chart says 400, but again, this chart is based on the fact that you've lost an engine after V1. But assuming, like in a flight sim environment where we won't lose an engine, it would be second segment up through 1,000 feet. After that, we would level off. I mean, not completely level off, but you would nose the plane forward just a bit so you can gain speed. And go through the flap schedules. And then once you get to 250 knots, because that's the speed limit below 10,000, you would then climb at 250 knots at climb power until you got to 10,000. And you would accelerate at that point to your cruising speed until you got to your cruising altitude. So that's the way that works. That's the basic elements of a takeoff. So now we're going to go into the sim and I'll demonstrate all this. Alright guys, we're now set up here at San Francisco International Airport. We are lined up for runway 1 right. Takeoff configuration from Top Cat is flaps 20, D-rate thrust takeoff 1 with a 41 degree assumed temp. Trim is set for 4 degrees, and the trim is very important. Don't forget to set your trim because that greatly assists you in having the plane properly trimmed out so that from the surface up through 1,000 feet you have an easier time maintaining your V2 plus 20. V speeds are 39, 43, and 50, so that's all put in as well. So we're all set up here ready to go. So flaps 20 is in. Pretty much everything is done except for you know, the parking brake and all that stuff. Let me reset the timer here. I'm not even sure why that's going. So let's see. You know, we won't worry about the timer at the moment. So let's see. Alright, so let's go ahead and begin the takeoff roll. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release the parking brake and then I'm going to spool up to 40 degrees. or 40% N1, excuse me. Alright, so park and brake off. So spool up.
Are you sure?
Don't mind FS2 crew. Take off. Alright, so now we're going to set the toga. Let me get lined up with the center line. I don't know why I wasn't lined up to begin with.
Thrust set.
Alright, so rolling on the runway. We're coming up on 100 knots. Alright, so now we're at the high speed, so I would not abort the takeoff unless I have a major malfunction here. Alright, here comes V1.
V1. Rotate.
Rotate. So now we're going to try to take off and climb at 170. Gear up.
Positive rate.
Alright, so I'm not having to do much on the...
400 feet.
Alright, so if you look here at this tape, you'll see, so now it turns white. And you'll see that there. And that's because, and now you see it's going away at 1,000 feet. And now we begin the acceleration altitude.
Climb.
Alright, so now we're going to climb. We're going to make a left turn direct to tidy, or tie-dye, excuse me. Going to nose it forward here just a bit. Flaps 5.
Speed check. Flaps 5.
Alright, so now we're going to roll out to tidy. Why do I keep saying that? Tie-dye. Alright, we're going to continue to accelerate on the speed. Flaps 1. And as you can see, I'm just following this flap schedule here that's on the side of the tape. No big deal there. Alright, so now I'm going to trim it. Trimming is very important. It helps you to control the airplane a whole lot easier.
Standard set.
I didn't tell her to do that. I'm not sure why she did it. Flaps up.
Speed check. Flaps up.
Alright, so now I'm going to trim it for 250. And I'm going to pull the nose up here so we don't bust the altitude restriction. Alright. And I can tell you right now, I am not even holding on to the flight controls. The plane is trimmed out and it's doing the climb all on its own. After takeoff checklist. After takeoff checklist.
After takeoff checklist. After takeoff checklist complete.
Alright, so now we're going through Trunking intersection. Still maintaining the climb, so now we're just basically climbing out through 10,000 at 250 knots until we get to 10,000 feet. And again, I'm hardly giving any control inputs because I've got the plane trimmed correctly. And that's very important. Makes it a whole lot easier to handle the airplane when you handle the trim. And that's what that FBW is right here, the fly-by-wire trim. Definitely helps a lot. Alright, so now we'll roll out towards our next intersection, which is Hype. Alright, so once we get to 10,000, we'll nose it forward. We still want to maintain, you know, a bit of a climb, you know, 1,000 to 1,500 feet per minute, but nosing it forward should help us to accelerate to our cruising speed. So we got 10,000 feet to go before we get to that point. Alright, so approaching 10,000.
10,000 feet.
Alright, so now I'm going to nose it forward to about 5 degrees. And this is going to help us to accelerate to our next speed, which is 316 knots indicated. I'm going to raise the trim up just a little bit, because like I say, that trim, it makes it a whole lot easier to maintain the airplane. I can't say that enough. Alright, raise up the trim a little more. See, we're still climbing, just not as great of a rate while we accelerate to 316 knots. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and set the trim for 316 knots. It's about close enough right there. Still maintaining 5 degrees pitch up. Alright, so as we approach it, we're going to go ahead and raise the nose back up so we can continue our climb on up to cruising altitude. Alright, so now we cross high P intersection. And there you have it. The plane's all trimmed out. And pretty much at this point, we'll just go to transition altitude. And we'll reset the altimeters for 29902, which is standard pressure. And that's about it. Alright, so at this point I'm just going to go ahead and turn on the autopilot. Alright, so autopilot's on now. Let the computer do the work now. Alright, so that's how you do a takeoff. You know, if you wanted to take off using autopilot, it wouldn't be a whole lot different. You can engage the autopilot not until you are 400 feet above the ground. Typically I hand fly my departures unless I'm, you know, flying on VATSIM or something like that. I do find it a bit cumbersome trying to deal with the radios and all that stuff. You know, if I'm having to get handed off to a bunch of centers and then I'm hand flying the airplane at the same time. So for me that does become a bit much. But if you know, if you don't have ATC coverage, you know, or you feel like you're able to handle radios while doing manual climb, then, you know, go ahead. But this is the proper way you want to do a takeoff and climb out up to altitude. Alright, so we're approaching transition altitude, so utilizing wonderful FS2 crew, I'll get it set to standard atmosphere. I'll go ahead and reset it now. Oops. Transition altitude standard set.
Standard set.
Alright, so now it's set to standard. And that's about it. I mean, really, there's not a whole lot else to see. I'll basically climb at 316 knots until I reach the Mach speed for cruising Mach. So let's say my Mach speed is 1.82. Right now you see it's going to Mach 0.67. So when that gets to Mach 0.82, I will no longer climb at knots indicated, and I will begin to climb at the Mach speed. But that's a few thousand feet to go. I'm not going to bore you with that, but hopefully that'll help some people out there that are wondering how the pros do it. You know, how do professionals take off and execute those takeoff procedures. So one thing I'll say is, you know, when you take off, make sure you have all your MCP panels set. You know, if you're going to do LNAV or VNAV, if they give you a departure heading, put your heading in and put that into here. Have that all done before you leave the ground. In any case, hope that helps. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, Southern Aviator. See ya.